Today we take a look at a subject that I consider to be one of the fun subjects, and that is the subject of dinosaurs. Where did dinosaurs come from? You'd be surprised how much the entry of dinosaurs into the discussion of origins has really changed the world's view on where everything came from. Some people have even doubted their existence. I don't think you can doubt the existence of dinosaurs anymore. They were here. Now today we're going to take a look at the information we have about dinosaurs and how they fit into the subject of origins generally. And right now, we're going to turn it over to our local hosts. Again, thank you for coming.
So we started this series taking a look at the origin of the debate itself. How did this debate between, evolution and creation begin? How did it, quote, evolve? We took a look at the origins of mankind, and last Tuesday we took a look at the account of the flood. Is it legit? Is it real? Well, today we're going to be taking a look at dinosaurs. It was April of 1977. Some Japanese fishermen on their ship Zuyamara. They were taking their nets, going underwater, getting their fish about 1,000 feet deep. They pulled up this rotted carcass. It looks pretty disgusting, huh? It looks pretty sick. But when you look at it and you're familiar with dinosaurs, what does it look like? Was that a plesiosaur? Oh man. And so the captain said, ditch this carcass. I don't want the fish that we have, that we worked so hard for, to be contaminated by this. Someone said, wait a minute, Captain, before you do that, let me take a few pictures. Let me cut off one of the pieces of the flipper as well. And so they came back, brought the pictures, and it caused a stir in Japan. They even had a postage stamp for a while there commemorating this creature. This was a plesiosaur, so there was a great stir about that. A little more analysis, though, on that piece of the flipper that was caught. And scientists determined that the protein of this flipper is only found with one particular creature, and that is the basking shark. And so most believe that was what's called a basking shark, rather than a plesiosaur. But still, ancient artwork abounds with creatures that many believe may be mythological, but very much look like dinosaurs. This is from 3000 BC in Egypt. You have what looks like two sauropods who are on leashes for two different men. Are these imaginary creatures? Did someone come up with this? That may well be, but it's just interesting that they look very much like animals that we find the remains of today. This is from a temple in Cambodia. This looks like a stegosaurus. The head is a little too big for a stegosaurus, but it's got the shields on the back of it. And we find a lot of ancient artwork like this, depicting creatures that look like the fossils that we find very often today. Scores of national and tribal legends from all corners of the earth, from China, all through Europe to the ancient Americas, speak of dragons. The word dragon means a large lizard or reptile. And so they speak of dragons. Here's one of these knights who was slaying a particular dragon. And in almost every one of these stories, the dragon is not in a herd, but it's one of the last ones coming out from a cave or so. And these legends, these stories are so rampant, some people take them very, very seriously. The late atheist and evolutionist Carl Sagan, you may be familiar with him. He wrote in his book, The Dragons of Eden, one of the things he speculated was that perhaps our very ancient ancestors, 10 to 100 million years ago, in their encounter with dinosaurs, it was so traumatic that it impacted the DNA, and the memories of these things remained in our DNA, and our more primitive, suspicious ancestors drew those out. Now, his colleagues, no one went along with that. They didn't want to give any sort of idea that they feel that these types of legends have any credence. But I thought it was interesting that one of the caliber of Carl Sagan would give these legends that type of credence, So let's go through a little history of discovery of dinosaurs. When did they first find dinosaur fossils, and what did they think about them? The first reported finding actually was in the 17th century. Robert Plot wrote a paper about a bone that was found, but he did not think it was a dinosaur. He did not know it was a dinosaur bone. In fact, the word dinosaur was not even known at that time. The word dinosaur was not generated or created until the 19th century. But he felt that this bone was from an elephant brought to Britain by the Romans. So this man was a chemistry professor at Oxford. So this was a bone that was found in England, and he speculated that this bone was from an elephant that was used by Roman soldiers, used by Roman armies that were brought up to England. He did not know at that point, but it did become classified eventually as a dinosaur. Robert Plot also found these bones and his jaw and his teeth of a megalosaurus. The word megalosaurus means a big lizard. Again, he did not know at that time. He did not call it a megalosaurus, but it was later classified as a megalosaurus. So sometimes scientists don't get it right, and sometimes pastors don't get it right either. Here's 1836 pastor Edward Hitchcock in Connecticut. He found near a church where he was pastoring these footprints, these large footprints, a whole bunch of them. And they're going in all different places. And of course, the footprint can only be made when it's mud, and that has to be hardened while the print is still there. So he thought that these were all birds. This may be, and I haven't looked at this yet, but these may be what you would find in Rocky Hill Dinosaur State Park today. What Pastor Hitchcock found. Well, he thought that they were from giant birds, but it was later determined that no, these were dinosaurs. So here's a pastor that didn't get it right. So things started picking up in the 19th century, in the 1800s. Back in England, again, one man found this huge tooth, and he brought it to scientists and tried to determine, what is this? One scientist thought maybe it was a rhino. Another one thought it was another creature. But one took a look at it and said, this is the bone of an iguana, except it's 20 times larger than what I've ever seen before. This is 20 times larger than what I've ever seen before. They did some more digging and came up with some more bones. And they determined this is a creature that they called iguanodon, which literally means iguana tooth. And the picture you see here is the first artist rendition of the iguanodon, based on the remains that were found. More remains were found, and now we view it as looking like this. Iguanodons could walk on either just their hind legs, or they could be quadrupeds as well. You have several dinosaurs that are like that. So this is in the 1820s or so. Sir Richard Owen is the man who coined the phrase dinosaur. He coined the phrase dinosaur from England. He was an anatomist, and what he did is he took two words, dinus and saurus, put them together, awesome lizard or terrible lizard. So that's how the word dinosaur came about, and that has been the word that has been used ever since. How do they classify dinosaurs? You would be interested to know that many of what people call dinosaurs are not technically classified as dinosaurs. But technically, in scientific literature, dinosaurs are those who dwelt on the land and are reptiles. and were around during the Mesozoic era of the geological column. So this is in 1851, again in England. They were getting a whole lot of attention. So this exhibit was set up, and around the exhibit, around the building itself, they put the Megalosaurus and they put the Iguanodon out there, models of them, and they're still there to this day. So these findings created quite a stir among people, a lot of interest. What are these creatures? We don't see them anymore. Look how huge they were as well. This is an iguana that is, a good 20 times larger than what we see today. Let's go back to American Dr. Joseph Leedy. He had a museum in Philadelphia, and someone on the New Jersey border got in touch with him, and right over the New Jersey border got in touch with him and say, hey, I found something that I think you'd be interested in. He took a look at the different bones, they assembled it, and said, we've never seen anything like this before. This is a hadrosaur. And I think the old term for hadrosaur was trachodon, duck-billed dinosaur, even though it doesn't look too duckish there. And they assembled that, and that became the first dinosaur put in public assembly in his museum in Philadelphia. People were coming from all over the world to take a look at this creature. They wanted to know, they wanted to understand, they wanted to see what this was. So the hadrosaur, you get an idea of how large the creature was. That was America's first discovered dinosaur, and it caused quite a stir. The first one that was put on display, I should say, in America. Well, when people hear about these things, you're going to get a stir. Just like in 1848, 1849, when people heard that there was gold in San Francisco, what happened? People rushed right over there. And when people saw these bones, they wanted to get some more of them. Most of the bones are found in areas like Wyoming and Montana and Utah. And so dinosaur hunters became very famous at this point in history and began going out and doing some digging in the mid-1800s. This one here really has a spotlight now. The world is getting acquainted with this. And in Europe in the 1800s, they were finding some more iguanodons. And also, the skeletons, some of the skeletons that were found in America were shipped to Europe, and so they can exhibit it into different areas of the world. This is the Brachiosaurus. At one time, this was considered the largest dinosaur. That's my imaginary friend I told you about, the Brachiosaurus. He was considered the largest or the heaviest dinosaur at that time. When I read children's books, Brachiosaurus was the one who, when I read dinosaur books as a child, Brachiosaurus was the one who held the record. American Museum of Natural History in New York had on display what was called a Brontosaurus. And that got quite a bit of fame. Years later, it was determined, though, that the fossil that they had the wrong head. It had the wrong head. The head was a Camarasaurus, the body was an Apatosaurus. And so the word Brontosaurus means thunder lizard, because the idea was that when this thing walked around, guess what happened? The ground must have shaken. And so they called it Brontosaurus, but there technically is no such thing as a Brontosaurus. Again, when I was a kid and I read dinosaur books, there was a Brontosaurus, but now they know they call it a Apatosaurus now, and it has a different head. It has a different head. And so with the findings of these different fossils, with the findings of these different remains, a lot of different artists began drawing things. If you ever go to the Yale Peabody Museum of Natural History, I think it's on the first floor, they have a whole bunch of dinosaur remains. You'll see one schematic, one picture that goes across the whole top of the wall that goes from the Triassic to the Jurassic to the Cretaceous period, where these fossils, where these remains are found. And this looks like that's one of those pictures. So these sauropod dinosaurs, these huge dinosaurs, are all herbivores. The teeth indicate that they were herbivores. So they would not be something that would threaten you to eat you But the big question is, would they step on you? That was the first concern probably someone would have when they saw them. However, before too long, they began finding another type of dinosaur. A dinosaur that definitely was carnivorous. A dinosaur that definitely would be eating up other creatures. This is the remains of a Tyrannosaurus rex. Henry Fairfield Osborn found this in 1905 in Wyoming, and he named it Tyrannosaurus rex, which literally means king tyrant lizard. It looked like a savage beast. And so it's put on display in 1905, and again, gained acclamation throughout the entire world. Strange creature, definitely walked on the two legs, and the two arms is still a puzzle. Why are the arms so small on this creature? What use did they have? It doesn't even look like they're able to reach the prey that it's going to be trying to eat. And so many T-Rexes have been found since then. And one of the things that have been discovered is that we get an idea of what it ate. Fossil remains have shown that one of the creatures that it ate was the Triceratops. Now, Triceratops is my favorite dinosaur. I love the Triceratops. Whenever I read about battles between Triceratops and T-Rex, I was always rooting for my Triceratops. But the Triceratops comes from a family which has the shell, and it said there's the Protoceratops, which has no horns. There's what's called the Monocolonius, which has only the horn on the nose. There's the Styracosaurus, which has like 6 horns or so. A lot of different varieties on this type of creature. But here's the fossil remains of a T-Rex with some Triceratop bones where the stomach would be. And some of the ribs of this T-Rex were broken. So the idea was that these two got to a big battle, and the Triceratops had broken some of the T-Rex's bones. And so very often these fossils are found contemporaneously within the Cretaceous area, within the Cretaceous layer. This is a footprint of a T-Rex. Notice the dimensions there. 33 inches long. How many feet is that? That's 3 feet.
Almost 3 feet.
28 inches wide. Over 2 feet wide. 9 inches deep. This is a heavy creature. This was a heavy creature. This was discovered in 1983, but was not identified until 1994. Now, this T-Rex that was found was the best that was ever found for quite a while. 40% of the skeleton was found, and this is where you've got to use your imagination. You got to use some real reasoning skills. This is what the rib probably looked like. The ribs probably got smaller, looking over there. So you only got 40% of the skeleton. A paleontologist will tell you if you got 10% of the skeleton, you've got a skeleton. And we can use those remains. So this was the best remain that was found until the 90s, when Sioux was found in South Dakota. It was named Sioux after the woman who found it. We don't know the gender of the creature, but it was named after the woman who found it, and a good 90% of the skeleton was found. So the more of the skeleton we find, the more we understand, the more we get of what the creature was like. And this one is now on display at the Field Museum in Chicago. Interestingly, we're discovering more and more about these creatures. We are finding some of them that apparently had feathers. As we see them compressed, we see what looks like feathers, and some of them had nubs on their bones that indicate that they may have had feathers. Not all of them, but several of them do. But something else that has been astounding has been discovered in this century, and that is soft tissue. Soft tissue is, it was Mary Schweitzer She was working with a T-Rex bone and broke it open, took a look in the inside, and to her amazement, she found soft tissue, red blood cell tissue. Now, this is not supposed to survive for very long. Soft tissue is supposed to decompose and be gone after several thousand years. How this creature is supposed to be at least 65 million years old. How is there soft cell tissue in this? Our next lecture on Tuesday, we're going to be looking at the origins of the Earth, and one of the things we're going to be examining is the dating methods that are used by conventional scientists to estimate the ages of these fossils. But this has been a real challenge. When Mary Schweitzer first published her findings, I have found red blood cell tissue in a T-Rex, she was ridiculed. She was blasted. And she was told, you don't know what you're talking about. But she said, I've looked at it time and time again. This is soft cell tissue. And now this is a common occurrence, not only with dinosaur fossils, but with those that supposedly predate them by hundreds of millions of years as well. Soft cell tissue is found commonly now in these fossils. Why did we find this before? Because we assume that these are tens to hundreds of millions of years old. You won't find that in there. Why bother looking? So this was found by accident, and now it's found commonly. Dinosaurs were apparently reptiles. How do we know this? This is a hadrosaur, as was mentioned before. And when this was buried, the mud pressed against it, took the shape of the body and took the shape of the skin, and then dried and was hardened. And from what you can see, this thing had scales. That looks like a reptile. So that's one of the indications that it was a reptile. Another indication that dinosaurs were reptiles was that they had eggs, and they kept their eggs on the land, and the eggs had shells around them. This is common among reptiles, among birds as well, but among reptiles too. Now, with dinosaurs, now this is a fake picture, these baby dinosaurs coming up out of the shells. That's a fake picture, just wanted to let you know that. With dinosaurs, you may think that the eggs are as large as a Volkswagen, but no, the largest dinosaurs, their eggs were only about the size of an ostrich egg. Ostrich eggs are pretty big. If you like eating eggs, try to get some ostrich eggs if you want a good meal out of them. But here's one remain that was found where the actual embryo was actually in development within the egg. Most eggs are found that are filled with sediment, sand or something, water and mud leaked into it, broke through the shell, leaked into it. But here's one that was found that was actually had a dinosaur forming within it. So number one, there were scales. Number two, they did eggs. And number three, one of the other indications that they're reptiles is they have what's called a diapsid skull. The diapsid skull. Here's the three different types of skulls that you see. Human beings have what's called a synapsid skull. Turtles are unique reptiles in that they have the anapsid skull. You see they have just the holes for the eye bones. They have the hole for the eye, but no hole behind it. The synapsid has the hole for the eye, but a hole behind it. Reptiles, the vast majority of reptiles have what's called a diapsid skull, which has that hole right behind the eye, and that's used for a muscle to hold to go around that hole and hold on to the eye itself. So here's three indications that dinosaurs were reptiles. What do they look like? Well, the more we find fossils, the more we get an idea of what they look like. This is a skull of an ankylosaurus, an armored lizard, a fascinating creature. And this is what it apparently looked like. It had a very hard head, and we're going to see another picture of him later. He's got knobs on his back, he's got a club tail, he's got spikes on his side, but you don't want to mess around with this creature at all. The popular concept, the popular idea today is that dinosaurs have evolved into birds. So if you ask some paleontologists today, are there dinosaurs alive? They say yes. The robin that comes and visits you every morning, that's a dinosaur. They claim that dinosaurs evolved into birds. And there's two ideas, two theories about how that took place. One of them is called the large ground biped theory. And that is those dinosaurs that walked on two legs, they eventually evolved into birds. That their short arms extended and became wings, and their tail became stunted, and they became birds. The other one is what's called the small crocodiles from the trees. This one I don't understand too much, but they say that these dinosaurs were in the trees and tried to grab their prey, and eventually they developed wings as a result of that. This is sounding like what's called Lamarckian evolution rather than Darwinian evolution. Lamarckian evolution is that creatures evolve based on their need. Darwinianism says creatures evolve based on the changes in their environment. But is this legitimate? First of all, dinosaurs had the large legs, the small forearms, and the heavy tails. This is completely opposite of what birds have. Completely opposite of what birds have. Furthermore, they had skin folds. And can those become wings? That's very questionable. They apparently, if they're reptiles, they are cold-blooded. They're cold-blooded. And birds are warm-blooded. Well, birds are not mammal, but they're warm-blooded. And so how do you go, and those are two different thermal systems in the body. Two different thermal systems. How do you go from warm-blooded to cold-blooded? And then you go from bumpy scales to feathers. How can that be? So these are the bumpy scales. Those cannot hold feathers. This is the kind of skin that you need in order to hold the feathers. One of the other arguments against dinosaurs evolving into birds is timing. Basically, a paleontologist, one who studies fossils, one who studies ancient creatures, will tell you that if fossils are found that indicate that these two animals lived contemporaneously, that they lived at the same time, one did not evolve into the other. You see what I'm saying? And so when they try to find hominid fossils and they see that, oh no, this looks human and it looks like it lived at the same time as these ancient apes did, that sounds like they lived contemporaneously. They could not be ancestors of one another. Anyway, so this is the geologic column that we talked about Tuesday night. Underneath here would be the Paleozoic early life. Right here is where the dinosaurs lived, the Mesozoic midlife, and we are living now in what's called the Cenozoic later life. And so feathered creatures have been found from mid-Jurassic to today. All right, have been living since today. One of the standouts is what's called the Archaeopteryx. Archaeopteryx was apparently a reptile, but it definitely had some feathers as well. And it was a creature that was able to fly. This is one of the most famous fossils of it, so you can see the imprints of feathers on this and its wings. So that's the Archaeopteryx, and Darwinists, evolutionists jump on this fossil and say this is clearly a transitional figure from reptiles to birds. However, when we take a look at dinosaurs next to them, one of the things we find is that the flying dinosaurs come later, about midway from the Triassic to the end of the Cretaceous. And land dinosaurs, they were through the whole Mesozoic strata here. They started with Triassic and go into the Cretaceous as well. Now, those who advocate for dinosaur to bird evolution, they say that it didn't come from the flying creatures. They don't say that anymore. It doesn't come from the flying reptiles like the pterodactyl or the pterosaur, but from the land creatures. Now, here's a problem with this. This is something interesting, because more evidence is being found that these feathered creatures started with the Triassic as well. And again, what do paleontologists say? If the two creatures lived contemporaneously, one didn't evolve from the other. One did not evolve from the other. Here, for example, is a slate found from the Triassic period, and these are definitely bird footprints, and they're going in all different directions, which indicating that it may have been going different directions in the mud. We know that it's a bird because it has that hind toe that you see there. And notice this quote about this finding. It's significant because we find footprints with morphology Morphology is a big word which means body shapes, okay? A wing is a morphology, an arm is a morphology. It's significant because we find footprints with morphology identical to modern birds and rocks that predate by 55 million years the first record of true aves. Aves is the flying dinosaurs, okay? So what is Ricardo Melchor saying here? He's saying, using conventional dating methods, these creatures, which look like birds, live contemporaneously with dinosaurs, and they predate flying dinosaurs by 55 million years. How then could they have evolved from that? And please note that he says the morphology is identical to modern birds, but he's reluctant to call it bird. You'll find that very often among evolutionists. There is a fossil that was found during the Mesozoic to modern ducks. And one paleontologist said, it looks like a duck, it may have sounded like a duck, but it definitely wasn't a duck. Why does he say that? Is because the worldview is so deeply entrenched in the mind that ducks evolved from dinosaurs and were not contemporaneous with them. So, did dinosaurs evolve? Here is the supposed tree of dinosaur evolution from contemporary science, conventional science. So we start over to the left with the supposed first dinosaur, ancestor of all others. And you have different branches that brings us to the right to those fossil remains that we have. We have found hadrosaur-type creatures, 229 of them. We have found 10,000 plus specimens of Triceratops and its relatives, 242 of the ankylosaurs. We found 200,000 birds during the Mesozoic era, and the rest. So the numbers you see here are the number of fossils that have been found of these different creatures. But we have not found that earliest ancestor. And guess what? We haven't found any of these branches either. This is just like what we looked at on Tuesday night. You remember where one evolutionist said that we have plenty of evidence at the tips, but we have no evidence in the branches. This is all inference. So with dinosaurs as well, there are no uncontested transitional figures. Here's an evolutionist, David Weishampel, I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly. From my reading of the fossil record of dinosaurs, he says, no direct ancestors have been discovered for any dinosaur species. Alas, my list of dinosaurian ancestors is an empty one. So just like the the total fossil record that we looked at on Tuesday nights, we don't find transitional figures, so it is when we look just at dinosaurs as well. All of a sudden, when the Triassic strata comes up, bang, we have an explosion of dinosaur fossils. And we find stasis, we find the same fossils throughout the Triassic. And then when Jurassic appears, Jurassic strata, bang, a whole bunch of new fossils, a whole bunch of new dinosaurs. And those we see throughout Jurassic, and same thing with Cretaceous as well. So, who holds the record for, when I was a kid, Brachiosaurus held the record for the largest dinosaur. Well, since then, Argentinosaur, guess where he was found? Yeah, Argentina, yeah. He holds the record. I think he's estimated weigh at 80 tons. 80 tons. And here you got an idea of how large he was compared to elephants. Pretty big creature. Some of these dinosaurs were huge creatures. Well, some of them were very small as well. Some of them get as small as chickens. Struthiomimus, ornitholestes, these are pretty small creatures. You see them running around your house, you call an exterminator, you want to get rid of them. If you had the Argentinosaurs coming to your house, you would get out of there. You would get out of it. So they come in different sizes. So when you think of dinosaurs, they're not all big, and they're not all perhaps dangerous. So what about dinosaurs and modern day reptiles? What is the difference between the two of them? Well, first of all, the answer to that is found in the hips. This is a Komodo dragon, one of the largest reptiles we have today. And his hips and leg structure, his legs go out of the side, and so his belly is close to the ground. His tail usually drags on the ground as well when he walks around. But with dinosaurs, their hip structure was such so that they stood, the legs went straight down. And so the body was not as close to the ground as you see in this artist's rendition. So that's one of the big differences between the two. Are modern day lizards leftovers from dinosaurs? That's hard to say. Their morphology, their body shape is a good number of differences, so we can't say that for sure. I want to take a look at a short video in which you have several scientists talking about their views of dinosaurs.
In the mid-1800s, when dinosaur bones were being found all around the world, they did much to strengthen Charles Darwin's questioning of the biblical account of creation. There's no question that these bones reveal an ancient world much different than the world in which we're living now. Let's go and take a look at where those dinosaur bones are being found. Let's go to a dig site in the state of Wyoming.
I got a call from a friend of mine, and he told me about this place in Wyoming where there were a lot of dinosaur bones and that they wanted a creationist to work on it. So I wasn't really initially interested, so I called a colleague of mine who's a vertebrate paleontologist, and he came out and looked at it. Subsequently, he brought me out here and we looked at it together, and the owner of the ranch, who's a very wonderful person, brought me up onto one of these ridges. It's actually very near to here. And he opened up the door of his truck and got out, and he said, "Okay, hop out." And I looked down at the ground. It was covered with dinosaur bones. I couldn't walk on the ground. I had to step nimbly to keep from stepping on them. But that convinced me that I needed to spend time on this, because these bones are being washed away and they're lost to science.
So somewhere, sometime, dinosaurs were here. And what we see behind us, this whole area, these are the main quarries here. There's some outlying quarries. But the main quarries are approximately 1 meter thick and cover quite an area. So the little bits you see here that's already been taken out, a couple other quarries, are about 1.5% of what we think the whole bone bed is. We have quite a range of dinosaurs. The main ones are hadrosaurs. They are the duck-billed dinosaurs, 35 feet long, 6 tons, 5 to 6 tons, big ones.
These dinosaurs show a lot of decay took place before they were buried, ultimately buried. They may have been buried and then re-emerged. But the most sensible scenario I can think of is that these dinosaurs were killed probably by drowning or some other cataclysm, and they floated and bloated so that the carcasses were floating on water. They were probably driven onto a shoreline by wind, where they rotted for a period of time. And during this time they were rotting, the carnivorous dinosaurs were still around, and they came over and began to eat on these carcasses, because we find the shed teeth of carnivorous dinosaurs, of the theropods. We find those in amongst the bones. Ultimately, the bones were remobilized and transported out into deeper water, and we know that because they occur in a graded bed. So the big bones are at the bottom and the little bones are at the top.
Our project has advanced our view on origins because of the techniques we use. The high precision GPS data allows us to map our bone beds. And by doing so, we've been able to figure out what event led to all these dinosaurs being deposited at this site. Our system is so advanced that the greater scientific community has noticed what we're doing, and we've been able to publish our data. I think this is amazing because not only are we seeing that our deposit was put there by a flood-like event, now that other scientists are examining their bone beds and looking for alternative scenarios, they're also seeing evidence of catastrophic flood events. And even though we can't say this is a global type flood event just yet, we do see more and more evidence for catastrophic flood events resulting in large bone beds.
I'm a biologist. I want to study these things. And I will tell you that when I look at dinosaurs, they're not the dreadful things that are frequently depicted in the movies. Yes, there are obviously some that were predators of various kinds, some of them terrifyingly big like T-Rex, or just terrifyingly big like the titanosaurs and things. But most dinosaurs were normal-sized creatures. Many of them were obviously herbivores, so they ate plants. I'd like to see one of those in action. They look like they were amazingly designed creatures, and I have lots of questions about them. I want to know how those absolutely huge dinosaurs, how they got blood up to their brains. We talk about how small their brains were, and I have lots of questions about that. But how did they pump all that blood way up there? These things are more than twice as tall, or at least twice as tall, as giraffes are today. We know that giraffes have very specialized systems to allow them to be that tall. I want to know what was going on with those dinosaurs that allowed them to be massive in the way that a few of them were.
I don't want to see a dinosaur when I first get to heaven because I'm still only 5'8". But we have the impression that we will grow up and just to see these enormous organisms, I would feel like an ant, and maybe be squished. But certainly that possibility exists.
This is a replica skull of an Edmontosaurus, the kind of dinosaur that they are finding the remains of thousands of there in the Wyoming dig site we just saw. Dinosaurs are a very popular subject today in the world, especially among kids. For many, they prove the idea that the world is millions of years old. But let's start thinking of them in a different way. Let's start thinking of them as a class of animals that God created that he might be actually rather proud of. Let's take a look at that now.
Okay. Are you looking forward to seeing a dinosaur someday? We're going to talk about no fear. Does the Bible have anything to say about dinosaurs? We're going to take a look at that. Does it have anything to say about it? Well, first of all, in Genesis 1, verse 21, it says that God created great sea creatures. This is from the New King James. That word creatures, that same word is translated in other versions of the Bible as dragon, serpent, monster. King James says whale. But it talks about in the beginning, on day 5, God created these huge creatures in the sea. But probably the passage that stands out most is one in Job chapter 40. If you're familiar with the story of the book of Job, Job was suffering and he was questioning God, and God appeared to him and confronted him in regard to his questions. And he started going through all these different creatures in nature, saying, "Can you tell me about this? Can you tell me about that?" And then he mentions this one near the end of his monologue to Job. He says, "Look now at the behemoth." which I made along with you. I made you, Job. I made the behemoth as well. He eats grass like an ox. See now, his strength is in his hips, and his power is in his stomach muscles. He moves his tail like a cedar. His bones are like the beams of bronze, his ribs like bars of iron. He is the first of the ways of God. Now, when God says he's the first of the ways, he's not saying I created him before every other creature. He's saying that he stands out, revealing the glory of God. Now, many scholars today say, what kind of creature are we talking about here? Now, notice the identifying marks. He eats grass. He has strong hips. He has strong stomach muscles. He has a huge tail, like that of a cedar. Well, some argue that this is a hippopotamus. Hippopotamuses are strong, by all means. I think if I tried to move his hips, I don't think I'd get very far. But when you take a look at that tail, that looks more like a blade of grass than it does a cedar. So some believe that this is a hippo, but this idea that he moves a tail like a cedar kind of, for many of us, rule that out. This is a picture of Job next to a hippopotamus. Hippopotamus is a big creature, but to call him a behemoth, say he moves his tail like a cedar, that doesn't ring a bell here. Many believe that this may be a reference instead to a sauropod. Sauropod has those huge tails that you would not want to get in front of. So these passages gives us an idea, an insight that perhaps dinosaurs were referenced in the Bible. But keep in mind, the Bible only refers to several specific creatures. The ant is referred to. The eagle is referred to. The vulture is referred to. So we don't want to say that the Bible rules out dinosaurs because it doesn't mention any by name. I want to be cautious with that. Well, some of the things that stand out about some of these ancient creatures was their self-defense mechanism. I mentioned the ankylosaurus. Notice he's got the knobs on the top of his back. If you were a T-Rex and you wanted to eat this thing, you wouldn't be able to get through his back. And if you tried to, you might get nailed with that club on the end of his foot. Now, the Stegosaurus, he's got the spikes on the top there. They're still don't know what those spikes were used, not the spikes, the shields, or the plates on his back. No one knows really what those plates were for. Were they for conducting thermal? Were they for temperature regulation? Don't know. Were they for protection? Possibly. But definitely those spikes were. There's the Pachycephalosaurus. He's a unique creature. He's got that knobby head. You ever seen a goat or you ever see rams nail each other with them? Yeah. And it appears that's what that might have been for as well. You don't want to mess around with these creatures. Now, some would argue if God created them, why would he create them to have such violent characteristics or violent potential? But when we look at nature today, we see that it is corrupt from what the Bible describes to us that nature was like in the very beginning. At the end of day 6, God said it was very good. Genesis 1 and 2 make it very clear to us that every creature was an herbivore. Nobody was eating anybody else. It wasn't until sin was introduced that we find violence taking place not only among mankind, but in the animal world as well. So what happened to dinosaurs then? What happened to dinosaurs? Did they get on the wrong boat? Is that what happened? Doubt it. My Bible doesn't say that. If indeed, one of the answers that is presented by conventional science was that there was an asteroid that hit the Earth and wiped out all the dinosaurs. Now, when I was a kid, the theory was that an ice age destroyed all the dinosaurs. When I was a kid, that was the theory. Now the popular theory is that an asteroid hit the Earth and destroyed and covered the sky with dust and destroyed all the the dinosaurs. Now, where did they get that idea? This is very interesting. That there is iridium in a layer just above the Cretaceous layer. Now, remember, Cretaceous is the last layer of the dinosaurs. Dinosaurs are in the Triassic, Jurassic, and Cretaceous. Right above the Cretaceous, what's called the KT boundary, you have some iridium dust. Well, iridium is very rare on the Earth, but they are found in some meteors. So when a meteor hits the Earth, we find some iridium in that meteor. And so that's one of the things that is believed to have happened that wiped out all the dinosaurs. That's one of the conventional views. Basing it on the Bible, however, the belief is that dinosaurs did get into the ark, and that their kinds were brought onto the ark. Now, someone might ask, wait a minute, remember that Argentinosaurus, how large that was? You couldn't fit that thing on the ark. How can you say that? I mean, again, look how large that sauropod is as compared to Job. But if dinosaurs were reptiles, and most of the evidence indicates that, reptiles today continue to grow as long as they live. In their juvenile years, they have a big spurt of growth, just like our own children, okay? But they continue to grow as long as they live. That's called indeterminate growth. They don't grow as quickly as they did when they were juveniles, but they continue to grow. So if the environment allows, you can put an iguana in a tank and it won't continue to grow. But if you leave it out, it'll continue to grow. Let me introduce you to Jonathan. This turtle here, in 2022, he turned 190 years old. 190 years old. When Sherry and I were in Illinois, one of the members of the church we pastored, one of their neighbors, had a 65-year-old turtle that walked around the yard. Big turtle, big turtle. This one's 190 years old. Turtles continue to grow as long as they live. As long as they live. Why is this important? Well, let's consider. Looking at the Bible genealogy, the Bible tells us that before the flood, man lived to 900 or more years. All right, Adam lived 930. Seth, his son, lived to 912. Enos to 905. Noah lived to 950 years. But after the flood, the age spans went down dramatically. Now, if mankind was living 10 plus times longer than what we're living today, what can we conclude about the animal kingdom? Animals were living longer before the flood than they were today. And again, reptiles continue to what as they live? They continue to grow as they live. And so, a Edmontosaurus, an Apatosaurus, a Titanosaurus, Argentinosaurus, these things would have hundreds of years to reach greater size than they would after the flood. Does that make sense? And they would be able to mate not very long after they reach puberty. Therefore, what the point I'm trying to make here is that Noah would not have tried to fit a 900-year-old Argentinosaurus onto the ark. All right? If you got a 10-year-old on there, okay, that'd be nice and small, and to be able to reproduce after the flood was over. But he wouldn't try to bring one of the larger ones on there. So, dinosaurs could have fit on the ark, but they could not be the huge ones. They had to be a much younger stage in their life. So, the Bible tells us something wonderful about the future. Isaiah 65 tells us, the wolf and the lamb shall feed together, and the lion shall eat straw like the ox. So Genesis tells us that God made everybody herbivores, all animals herbivores in the beginning. On the new earth, that'll be the same as well. There'll be no T-Rexes and Triceratopses battling with one another. The wolf and the lamb shall feed together, the lion shall eat straw like the ox, the nursing child shall play by the cobra's hole, and the weaned child shall put his hand in the viper's den. They shall not hurt nor destroy in all my holy mountain. Praise God for that. So God had Noah build the ark because of the judgment that was to come. And anyone who wanted to go on that ark would be saved. Judgment is to come again. A new earth is to come. And the opportunity is open for you and me as well to get on the new ark, the ark given to us by Jesus Christ, that we may be saved. And I want to encourage every one of us to be part of that. So, questions and answers. Kelly.
So I'm struggling with this a little bit because
Yes.
if according to that the diagram showed dinosaurs were in the Mesozoic and humans were in the Cenozoic era, and you're saying now that there were probably dinosaurs on the ark.
Yeah.
If that's the case, how come there aren't dinosaurs today?
That's a great question. Are there not dinosaurs today? Remember in the beginning we talked about the ancient art, which shows dinosaur-like creatures interacting with human beings.
Right.
All the legends of men slaying dragons. So you brought the question I did not bring out. Anybody ever hear the dodo bird?
Yes.
You know, people call somebody the dodo bird. Yeah. You know what the dodo bird actually was? It was a land-dwelling bird that went extinct in the 1600s. Well, what do we know about the dodo bird? People wrote about it. We see some drawings about it, but was it a mythical creature? Well, now we're finding fossils about it as well. Okay, so humanity was probably the largest factor for the extinction of the dodo bird. And we find that a lot. Creatures are dying. There's a much greater variety of creatures in the fossil record than there are today. Why is that? Because creatures are being extinct on a regular basis. They're being extinct on a regular basis. So why don't we find dinosaurs today? If we have legends of men slaying dragons, it indicates to me that maybe man played a part in that as well. I want to be cautious. Evolutionists will tell you that man never saw a dinosaur. In fact, when I was a kid and I read these dinosaur books, it was very emphatic. Man never saw a dinosaur. They're very emphatic about that. But remember Tuesday we saw that the fossil record could be an indication of what's called ecological zonation, that creatures were living in different parts, in different environments of the world, and as the waters rose, it covered them. And so men were not necessarily living with dinosaurs, and men and mammals had more intelligence to get to the high hills than the reptiles did. And so they were covered. That's why we find them in the Mesozoic era strata. We don't find man there. In fact, we find very few human fossils, very few. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
So I have a question, but I also have something to kind of maybe add from her.
Yes, yes.
Because I've dove into this since I was young.
Yes.
And, they always said that we never saw a dinosaur, but there's so many stories from so many. The one that comes to mind most is in South America, these people in tribes and jungles and stuff that are saying that they see something like the Brachiosaurus or something, the long neck, something of that, nature. But also the coelacanth, which was supposed to not exist. It was supposed to have died with the dinosaurs, and they found them. First they found the dead one, but now they're finding them alive.
Yes.
So some of them do still exist.
Yeah, we're gonna look at the coelacanth on Tuesday. The coelacanth was a fish that they argue was a bridge from sea creatures to man creatures. I think they said 500 million years ago or so. They thought it was extinct, but they're now thriving off the coast of South America.
There's so little of our oceans that we've explored that we don't know.
Do you have a picture of them?
Huh?
Do you have a picture of them next time?
Yes, you'll see the coelacanth. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
My question though
Yes.
is, and I've had this conversation with so many people, who are just like, oh, dinosaurs can't have existed because they're not in the Bible. People say this to me all the time.
Yeah.
And my argument always is the word dinosaur is so new.
Yes.
And
Good point.
the Bible does mention dragons. Do we think those could be the same thing?
Yeah. Yeah, some people believe that's the case. Job 40 also talks about a sea creature. Was that a mosasaur? You know, Leviathan. Thank you. Yeah, Leviathan. Yeah, was that a mosasaur or was that a plesiosaur? And some of the descriptions of it.
You know what? And it also, aside from the Bible, you know, when you look at different cultures, there's so many stories throughout the world about dragons.
Yes.
There's recipes that call for things from dragons.
Interesting.
The Chinese zodiac
Yes.
has animals and a dragon. Why would they have only
Right.
one mythical creature?
Right.
So when you pull all these things together, for me, it's like they had to invent it all.
Yeah. There's I think that if there's only one here or one there, okay, that's
Right.
superstitious or made up. But when it's so broad like this, it's got to have some concrete basis to it. It's got to have some concrete. And I like what you bring out, the Chinese zodiac. 11 of the months are creatures we know today, and one of them is a dragon.
Right.
Why would they use a mythical
I think
one?
that's one of the ones that really made it sit for me. That and the whole ancient recipes that call for dragon's blood or dragon's this. Or,
That's interesting.
why would you have something that wasn't real in a recipe?
A lot of ancient writings refer to dragons in a casual way, as if everybody knows that exists.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Thank you. Any other questions? Charmaine?
I have two. So the bone that was found in England, why did they assume it was, why did they assume it was an elephant bone?
Because they had never, people didn't know about dinosaurs at that point.
Right.
Dinosaurs were not, established as, creatures of the past until the 1800s or so. And so when you first saw the bone, like when the person saw the tooth, what tooth is this? Well, someone said it looks like an iguana. But then they find additional remains. This was a huge iguana. This was a huge iguana. So it was ignorance of dinosaurs. Did that answer your question?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And my other question, when they dug further into the bone, you said it was soft tissue. What's the relevance of the soft tissue?
Yeah, good question. Good question. We're going to dig into this more on Tuesday. But soft tissue, like blood cells, collagen, cartilage, those, when someone dies, those begin deteriorating right away. And they're not supposed to last for more than 10,000 years or so. And yet here we find them in these creatures that are supposedly, tens of millions of years old, tens of millions of years ago. Now, Mary Schweitzer, the one who first found that, she's done a test where she's felt that perhaps the fossil site was infiltrated with some type of iron. And she has in her lab iron mixed with the blood cells, and the blood cells have largely been preserved for the past 2 years or so. And so some believe, okay, there's some type of preservation that took place for 65 million years or so. But that, you want to be cautious with that type of reasoning because we're talking about the open air here. Triceratops fossils and other fossils have been found deluged still with water. So that's a lot of contamination there. If you have a lot of iron going in there, that's going to be washed away. And so these environments where these creatures were buried have probably gone through quite a few different changes. So remember we talked about uniformitarianism on Tuesday? So Mary Schweitzer's argument is based on uniformitarianism that infiltrated but stayed there. And that's not too likely, though. That's not too likely. Scientists, paleontologists know that soft tissue is something very difficult to explain. But it has to have been preserved for some way for hundreds of millions of years or tens of millions of years. It had to be because evolution is true. So that's the worldview goggle. Belinda, then Omar.
Yes, this is more of an opinion question. Let's just take us back, dinosaurs are real. What does that tell us about God's character?
Good point, good question. What does that tell us about God's character? That's why I wanted to look at the Ankylosaurus and the Stegosaurus and the Pachycephalosaurus. These creatures look like they had violent, or self-defense mechanisms. But we see that in many other creatures today as well that are alive today. Two things. Number one, many believe that God created creatures foreknowing that sin was going to take place and that the ecology was going to be preserved by carnivorism, if that's the word. And so he created creatures with self-defense mechanisms so that they wouldn't get wiped out. That's one thing. That applies to all animals. The other belief is that there may have been these mutations and these adaptations that were built into these creatures as well. Dinosaurs, we have the tendency to categorize them separately from all other creatures. That's because we've been taught that man never saw a dinosaur. They lived only this period of time. They're very unique. Yes, we don't see them today. Yes, the world before the flood is very different from what we see today. But if we view it from a biblical perspective, they are creatures of God, and you see the power. I like what Timothy Standish said there. You see the glory of God in these creatures. Incredible design. Many, when I was a kid at least, many believed that the Brachiosaurus that I mentioned had to have two brains. Because the head was so small and the body was so large, how can you have a brain that's going to send signals and conduct the entire body? But the more we learn about the brain, the more we learn it's not the size of the brain that determines its efficiency, but the organization of the brain. So what this tells me is that this Brachiosaurus had a very small brain, a head a little larger than ours, a very small brain compared to the rest of the body, and yet that brain was able to conduct the whole body. So it just shows you again more of the glory of God. And God loves diversity. God loves diversity. And so you see creatures that are huge, but you see these other little creatures as well. That diversity tells us about God's glory as well. Those are my thoughts on that. Good question. What are you thinking?
It almost seems like his experimentation, let's try a fun one. Let's try a big one.
Yes.
Let's.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Going back to God's rebuke of Job, he says, if you consider the ostrich doesn't care for its eggs. It lays the eggs and leaves it alone. If a lion comes along and starts eating the eggs, it sits there and watches him. And then God says, if you considered the ways of the ostrich, I made him that way. Why would God make an animal that does not care so much for its offspring? It boggles the mind. It's going to give us something to think about for eons on the new earth. The kangaroo, when the child is born, it has to take the climb up the stomach to get into the pouch. If it doesn't make it, oh well, mom just hops along. Why did God make the kangaroo that way? So there's a lot of questions in nature. It's bizarre. You'll find incredible contrast between those that have strong maternal instincts and those that have none whatsoever. Very interesting. Omar and then Lena.
Well, you did touch some basic thought that I wanted to confirm, but I don't want to overstep over you. But one thing for sure is that creation itself and the design of all things, it shows a magnitude of diversity, colors, textures, different types of bone structure, as we saw here, purposes, different purposes, different purposes within nature. Certain animals have the tendency to protect or to destroy certain elements that other creatures need them or create from them. So it's a very we have a tendency to only look at one creature, but there's a togetherness, let's put it that way to make it simple, of the different designs put together. Yeah. That's why we see these differences in animal sizes, because every single one has, it brings, it might sound a little ethereal, but it's not. It brings balance to what God wants to show to his highest masterpiece,
Mhm.
and that is man.
Yes,
Because of all animals, the only one that we have seen that have been able to communicate language very accurately and to bring about math and science and to be able to inspire themselves to poetry and all these things is only man. But the one thing, we should not be looking so far away from years ago. Today news are very particular, especially in the area of Idaho. They were able to find a cactus of, I don't know if I could pronounce it well, it's tooth wolf. It's a big abnormal wolf that supposedly is not supposed to be extinct like 10 million ago.
yes, white.
It is, I forgot the name, but it's tooth wolf, I forgot the name. But the thing is, very peculiarly, where they found it, in the least peculiar place you could think of, is Skinwalker Ranch. And they saw the carcasses deteriorating
So it's fresh
in the
dead.
river.
Fresh dead.
And it was fresh dead, and they brought it to the scientists, and they figured out it was only a few years old.
Interesting.
And they couldn't, but this is my point. If you read prophecy, there's gonna be a certain level of revelation of things that man have not seen.
Yeah.
And there is, some of us might think that everything that is spoken in Revelation is more like a imagery that John was imagining things. We saw a lot of stuff that we still are determining today in many of those issues. So I consider, if you believe in Bible prophecy, if you believe in Genesis, you have to start believing in Revelation.
Well, brother, in the autumn, we're going to have a prophecy seminar. We're going to be going through the book of Revelation. We're definitely going to send you a personal invitation to that.
That
Lena,
is very interesting.
it is. Lena.
I just thought it was interesting. You showed the diagram of the elephants compared to the dinosaur, like how big it really is.
Yeah.
And that God made it. And it just stuck in my head. My God is so big,
Yes,
so strong,
amazing.
so mighty.
It is nothing like
I looked at
God.
like how big he really was. Like,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
like that was crazy. But so that was just that. But I'm curious, I'm going back to the cedar thing.
Yeah.
The cedar, the tail like cedar. Are they referring to the color of the cedar tree? Are they talking about the size? Like, I'm just trying to understand what
yeah.
cedar is.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, Job 40, it is talking about the way it swings.
Okay, so when you're talking about a tree, a cedar tree.
The cedar tree, yes. Yeah. Well, not so much with the way the tree swings, but the size of the cedar. It's one of the biggest trees in the Middle East.
Right.
And so its tail is like a cedar, not so much in its color, but in its size. And it swings it back and forth. Yeah. You don't want to
swing it back and forth. I don't understand.
the behemoth swings the tail back and forth, and the
Right.
tail is like a cedar tree. So it's
Because
talking
of
about
how hard it is.
what the size
The
is.
size. How
Yeah.
big.
Yeah.
How big?
Yeah. But check out Job 40 and
Yeah.
let me know your thoughts on that. I'd be interested in that. And yes.
So I was wondering, in Genesis 1:21, we talked about the creature in the sea. Why couldn't he have been referring to a whale?
Yeah, that's what King James scholars, translators believe. They translate that to whale. That same word is translated to serpent in many other passages, and to monster in other passages as well. So could it be referring just to a whale? That may well be, but I prefer the translations that are consistent with that word. And so when you look at different translations, some will say monster, some will say serpent, and King James says whale. Yeah. So could it be just a whale? It may well be. It may well be. But the other, as mentioned, the Leviathan in Job 40, that tells you about a huge creature in the sea too.
If I'm mistaken, the original word on there is translated originally as Draco. Draco, like a dragon kind of creature.
Yeah, there it is right there. Tenem is the Hebrew word. Definitive, yeah. So if you go ahead and take a look at that at some point, you can see elsewhere. It's in Ezekiel a couple of times, and quite a few other passages. All right.
That's good.
Okay. Yes.
We looked at some dinosaurs that had defense mechanisms like the Stegosaurus and the Triceratops. What would be the purpose of those defense mechanisms if we are thinking that these are creatures that existed before sin, before the fall of man? Why would they need defense mechanisms? Or could they have come later, perhaps?
Yeah, and I don't know if I have a good answer for that. What would be the purpose of the Stegosaurus' spikes when everybody was an herbivore? I don't know. Could it be something that, again, genetic material that got front-loaded into the creature? And should the environment become violent, then it's developed? That may well be, but I'm in the area of speculation there. But that's a good question. Saul, you had? Oh, okay. Any other thoughts, questions before we close? Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you. This is a topic I relish. I drool.
If you would like more resources or more information regarding origins, please scan the QR code shown. May God bless your day.